Good afternoon, cuties, and welcome to Connect Café, where we tell stories about everything queer and tech. I'm Naufel, co-founder at QueerTech, and your host. As you all know, QueerTech is based in Tehuantepec in Montreal, and we would like to begin by acknowledging that QueerTech is located on unceded indigenous land. The Kenya Kainahe Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and the waters on which we gather today. Big thank you again to our presenting partner RBC, who are presenting this series throughout this year, and also would like to thank our other partners: Sage, Unity Technologies, Sun Life, Ubisoft, VanHack, SpaceSafe, and Local Logic. I'm really excited, as some of you might have seen online, that we are hosting our second virtual job fair and conference on November 4th and 5th. And as you see, we have amazing partners joining us. There are a few more that are coming up on an updated version next week. And for those who are interested to register and join the events, you can register on queertech.org/careers virtual fair. If you go on our website, you'll find the link there. You can also find more details. As you see on the screen here, we also have a Facebook event and a LinkedIn event on our QueerTech pages, so you can check them out. And if you know anyone who's queer and looking for a job in tech or looking to advance their career in tech, you can share this event with them. The last one we had over 350 participants across Canada, 25 partners. It was an amazing event. So we're really, really excited to be doing these events over the next 2 days. As you also know, we do have a job board that's live for those who are looking again for jobs in tech or looking to advance their career in tech. It's queertech.org/jobs, and you can go and check them up. If you do need any help or need any advice on the companies that we're partnered with, you can reach out to me at naufel@queertech.ca. So before we get started with our guest for today, for those who have any questions or comments throughout the duration of our live stream, you can write your questions or comment on the comments box in the social media outlet you are watching us on. You can also tag anyone who's looking for a job in tech or looking to advance their career in tech and need directions, inspirations, or motivation. Just be aware that we might show your comments or questions on this live stream. For those who love what we do and want to support us, support QueerTech, you can donate on our websites to queertech.org and queertech.org/support. Thank you so much for your support. And also thank you for all those who continue to support QueerTech on a monthly basis. So, very excited for our guest today. Walid Ali is working at RBC. He's been there for 5 years now and is currently leading a regulatory project with a focus on cloud technologies. In the previous role, Walid was a product manager for OpenShift, RBC's private cloud containers as a service. Before that, Walid has worked with several cloud platforms and cloud infrastructure projects. I'm really excited to welcome Walid to the show, and you may reveal yourself.
All the pizzazz. It's fantastic. Thank you so much.
It's a red carpet welcome, So, hi, Walid. How's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Yeah, really excited to have you on QT Connect Cafe. As usual, I'd like to start with my pronouns are he and him. And what are your pronouns?
So, hi, everyone. My name is Walid Ali. My pronouns are he and him. Yeah, hello.
Wonderful. Excellent. So I have a lot of questions for you, and we're really excited to get to know you, learn about your career, and learn a little bit about RBC also. So, I like to kind of go a little bit to the beginning of your life and tell us a little bit like where were you born, where did you grow up, and where did your story begin?
Right in the fields. All right. So my journey started about 30 or so years ago. I was born in the Emirates. For a lot of people that don't know, it's the United Arab Emirates. That's they have Abu Dhabi and Dubai as their biggest cities there.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up a good portion of my childhood there. So there was a little bit of back and forth between Abu Dhabi and here in Toronto and the GTA. I think I spent around age 6 is when I came to Canada. I spent 2 or 3 years here in elementary school, went back, did some middle school, high school, and ended up back here for the last couple of years of high school before I decided to go off to university. So if people know a little bit about the Middle East, it's not exactly the most tolerant place in the world for anyone from the LGBTQ plus community. So it was definitely not an easy upbringing there.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we're subjected to, a lot of homophobic comments and offhand things. And it's not the best place to grow up as a gay person.
No, it's unfortunate. I mean, I grew up also part of my life in Morocco and definitely know how that feels. And so, coming to Canada, you were, still young and so you went to high school and university in Toronto. Which university did you go to?
So I went to Ryerson University in the Business Technology Management program. So it's a commerce degree, but focused in tech.
Interesting. So did you always want it to be a tech person?
A tech person? I don't think that I was necessarily invested in tech as much as I am in now. When I was younger, I was just very if you ask me when I was younger, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I want to be a businessman. Ultimately, I think we'll talk about it in a little bit, but how my career ended up translating is there's a good portion of that is reflected in my career, but I had the opportunity to work in tech, which is always super exciting, and there's always new things happening. But yeah, eventually I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's wonderful. And what was the first job you had after university?
So that was at RBC. It was I started a co-op position at RBC. It was completely blind fate. I remember interviewing for a competing bank. I won't say which one, but both roles were very, very appealing. But ultimately, RBC won me over, and then I went through my career at RBC, all 5 or so years, a little over 5 years now.
Yeah, I saw that and I want to talk a lot about it. Before we kind of jump into your professional careers, this is a time we want to get to know you a little bit more. And so, going through high school, university, as LGBTQ people, we always have the big coming out time that we do, either at university, high school, depend on when people make terms with it. So I want to talk a little bit, just some pivotal life moment also impacting you. Growing up, you mentioned you were born in the UAE, moved here. You have an Arab family. So like how? So talk to us a little bit about that journey and some of the pivotal things that really impacted your life.
Funny that you asked this question now, because like there's a lot of things that tie into it and come to a good resolution at this point. So I call it the 4 phases of coming out. The first phase is usually when you come out to yourself.
Yeah.
The second phase is when you come out to your friends or family, depending on what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
The one that where you come out at work, and then eventually whatever is left over from the friends and families, like that.
Yeah.
So I think from a comfort perspective, most people usually come out to themselves before they come out to anyone else. And just growing up in a very conservative household, it's not something that is perceived as a good thing. Like nobody in the Middle East usually, at the point that I was born, wanted to have a gay child. That was a bad thing to have. So I came to terms with it later in my life. I think around 21 is when I stood there in front of a mirror and decided to say the words "I am gay," and the world around me did not crumble. I was still alive. It was fantastic. So that was a very empowering moment for me, coming out. Very nervous about it, and I thought this is something that I do want to explore. I know it's perfectly normal for people to want to go through, like a journey of flip-flopping back and forth. Is this something that I am? Is this something that I want? But for me, I think at that point, it was just very clear that it was black and white. I'm like, yes, I am gay. I went on my first date shortly thereafter. I'm like, I felt rainbows painted the night sky.
Love it.
It's these emotions that you're overtaken with, like your stomach kind of crunches together and gives you like this happy feeling. You're like, I think this is the right thing. I've never felt this feeling before.
Yeah.
So that was the first pivotal moment. I think the second pivotal moment is when I started coming out to some of my friends. And at that point in my life, I think it was like early 20s still. Most of my friends were, not most, like a good portion of them were Middle Eastern. And my perception is that, similar to how I grew up in the Middle East, and I grew up partially in the Arab community here, people aren't as accepting as I would like it to be.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised by most people's reactions. I repeat, most people's reactions in the Middle Eastern community. Granted, there are a lot of these old school, still conservative mindsets which have their place, but don't really resonate with the LGBT community. However, a good portion of my friends were surprisingly accepting. People are like, so sorry that you have to wait this long, so sorry that you have to go through these things in order just to be yourself, and said some very kind things that just made them seem like they kind of understood my journey right off the bat. So it was great. It was great to see that. I think as time progresses, that even conservative societies are able to come to terms with, hey, there's gay people in the world, there's LGBT people in the world, and they have a place. And there's a certain level of respect that's given as well. So that's the second part.
Yeah.
Third pivotal moment is when I started coming out at work. I think I was at RBC for a couple of years before I decided to do that. I was just feeling kind of lonely in my life, and it wasn't really connecting with people, and I really wanted that extra depth, and I just didn't know how to articulate it. So it came in a form of an invite from one of our ERGs, employee resource groups at RBC. They were having this massive parade in Toronto, like it was part of the Pride Parade, and it was I think there was like 700 spots that they wanted to fill, and they asked if people would be willing to participate, and I'm like, so nervous. I'm gonna probably be on TV, but who cares? Let's just do this. So I went. I met some fantastic people. I helped out a little bit, but ultimately, it's what ended up connecting me to the employee resource group at RBC, and kind of helped me along with my journey, helped me meet some of my mentors that not have only helped me with my career, but have helped me with my coming out journey based on my needs. So that was fantastic to see the support that I had from an RBC perspective. And eventually all of my colleagues found out, or I told them. I was relatively comfortable with myself at that point that it was fine for people to find out. And then finally, the most difficult one, let's take a journey between the day I came out to myself around 21 until probably a little overlap, like a year ago. I came out to my family, my parents specifically. And that was a terrifying experience. I would say I've had somewhat of a privileged life, but I think I've gone through my fair share of like difficulties. And I think that was probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. It's just nerve-wracking. It's you're challenging a relationship of 30 years. You're challenging the very foundation that it sits on. And especially for people that were born before the color television, I'm going to say, right? And have lived and grown up in very remote parts of the Middle East as well. Didn't grow up with a lot of privilege. You find it's a very conservative place to be in. It was definitely an emotional time, and my coming out in the beginning wasn't very well received. But what I loved about it is I think my parents at that point started seeing me as their adult son. I'm the youngest of 5. I haven't mentioned, but I'm always the baby, no matter how old you are. So I think they kind of took what I had to say into consideration. They were talking to me like an adult. They were having a hard time with it, but have accepted the journey that I'm on to a certain extent. Granted, it's not hard, and it has taken some time to get to where I am, and there's still quite a ways to go in the journey. But I'm ultimately thrilled that I've gone through these 4 pivotal points in my coming out story. I think is, it makes me feel kind of sentimental and very happy.
Thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, I think a lot of times we forget how much time it takes us to go through this process, right? And like you mentioned, phase 1 is it took us a long time to just come out to ourselves before we even tell our friends, and then you tell family, and you tell work, and this is continual process. But we forget that when we tell, especially parents or people who are close to us, that also they need that time to process and understand where we're coming from. So, but I love hearing also, a good end to a story in a way. Not everyone is privileged and lucky as we are when they tell parents and family and friends. And so I feel also we never stop coming out. It's a continuous process to continuously tell people. What I loved in the story also, you talked about, were you out at university?
No, I wasn't out in university.
So you got your first co-op job. It took you 2 years to kind of start telling people. What was kind of the trigger that you were like, okay, I need to tell people, and how did you go about it?
Right. So that's a really good question. I think that the answer is stability in whatever form that means for anybody, right? So there's something that I haven't mentioned, is that when I was in university, I was involved in a very severe accident, and I had to do like a lot of physical therapy, and it was a very hard time. But ultimately, like when you're coming out of an experience like that, what you're craving the most is like, how do I return to my previous state? How do I return to stability? And so for me, that meant that you need to finish university, get a job, and like start a foundation for yourself. I think the 2-year mark is where I started feeling that, hey, like I think I have the beginning of my career kicked off, and now I want the next thing. I want to feel like I'm connecting with people in a different way, and to be able to be authentic and have those good relationships that you want around you. You need to be able to express yourself fully. And I didn't feel like I could do that because I was always holding back, always second guessing what I was saying, always like, changing your pronouns and the person who you're seeing and things like, it was just a big, it's like a big heavy thing on your mind constantly, very taxing. So I think that's the point where I'm like, you know what, let's see where this goes. Let's push the envelope a little bit and see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming out at work is probably like one of the hardest things that people also do after telling friends, families, and stuff, because you feel like you're putting so many things on the line, and you don't know how people are going to accept it. People still are afraid to miss out on advancing their careers and opportunities at work. People still fear discrimination at work. We spend so many hours working with people around us, but it's also such a burden when you don't come out. Like you say, it's like you spend so much energy and effort trying to figure out what story have you told who. And so definitely there is this comfort and this peace of mind that comes once we do the coming out to work. From your experience, do you feel like you've advanced quite well your careers over the 5 years at RBC, and I know people who says work doesn't need to know who I am and who I sleep with, and like this is my romantic life and I want to keep it outside of work. But I personally don't believe that it's like the right thing to do, because I think there's something behind that always nags you. But people are different, right? So I'm curious for you, would you say you would be where you are if you didn't come out at RBC?
So no, I wouldn't say that I would be where I am if I didn't come out, and that's not because necessarily of some easements that were given to me as a result of coming out, because you are correct in saying that some people can fear repercussions at work. It's just natural for anybody anywhere to feel that. So I think what ultimately, sorry, let me just take a step back. I want to say something, that everybody's entitled to their own prerogative. And I too, at some point, I went through a phase where I thought, what's the point of telling anybody? And you have to answer this question for yourself. For me, the answer was that the benefit is being able to be truly and fully who I am. So taking that tax burden on your processing power from your brain and just shifting it out the door and allowing yourself to just be. So when I came out at work, I stopped hesitating. I started being louder. I stopped, you gain a lot more confidence, and that confidence translates into the quality of the work that you're pumping out. It translates into just being able to be trusted more with like larger responsibilities. I do remember points in my career where like I was perceived to be the quiet one in the room, and now I'm like the loudest one in the room. Sometimes to my own.
You're like, I am the loudest.
I'm like, I wish they were giving awards for this.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Absolutely. We also, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and you are a little bit shy person, and do you feel like, because there's a lot of things that come up when we're not out, right? And we try to protect ourselves. We don't want to put ourselves out there because you don't want to be visible, right? Because you have this thing that you're hiding. Do you think I kind of see like your personality start to change once you come out? Did you see that? And what are some of the things that you had that you kind of let go, and what are new characters that you felt like you were developing?
Great question. Yes, everybody. Yes, I was born the most shy person you could possibly meet. Like I was petrified to even open my mouth and allow words to come out. So ultimately, I think from a personality change, I wouldn't say personality change, but like a personality reveal.
Yeah.
Standing by your decisions, making decisions and standing by your decisions, being unrelenting on something that you believe to be true. Because not only are you standing up for yourself, you're standing up for something specific. So when you're able to do that, that's part of my coming out journey, is like being able to stand up for myself and who I am, and regardless of what anybody had to say about it, I was making the conscious decision to say no to people that are going to stand in my way, and be able to prop up others like me, because it is a difficult journey. So how did my personality change ultimately? Is that I think I won't back down on certain things. Obviously, you have to be flexible with everything, but there are certain things that are inherently principal to who you are and things that you stand for that you will not stand down on. So it's important to be able to stand by my decisions. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. You know what? If you didn't tell me in previous conversations that you were like the shyest person and I would have never guessed. I'm like, really? I've been in meetings with you, I've talked to you, and shy, is not something that I would imagine about you. So it's amazing to also see the progress in the journey that you've made and the role that you're taking on. So it's really amazing. And so, talking about careers, because I was really fascinated to see just like the progress that you've done in the last 5 years. And I'm going to start a little bit. What's your role at RBC today?
So right now I'm a program lead. It's in a regulatory space. So in my entire career, the focus has always been around cloud and cloud technologies and cloud infrastructure. But in today's world, I'm managing a project for private cloud and public cloud and regulatory findings
all the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff.
So on a day-to-day basis, give us a little bit more. So people who are not familiar with all these things, what is it that you do every day?
So my job requires a high level of interaction with other people. As you can see, I think I've had a lot of practice to be able to speak, to go from shy to here. So a big part of my role is being able to get the right people to do the right things and be able to deliver on them ultimately, but in a way where you're delivering value, right? So you have to be able to define what that value is. Mm-hmm. So I start by creating a massive plan and identify all the stakeholders and make sure that we are trending correctly up towards those plans. And it involves a lot of meetings with executives. It involves a lot of reworking and opinions, and regardless of whether you're able to make a decision on a product or not, you always have to consult all the stakeholders that are involved. But from a regulatory perspective, you have to be very careful in how you're presenting information day to day. And you have to make sure that it's accurate and make sure that it's complete and that you're not missing anything specific. But ultimately, that's not the fun part of the job. The fun part of the job is when things come to fruition and you are getting to deal with a lot of people on a regular basis and solving problems together. I think ultimately any job in a corporation requires you to solve those problems. And the fact that you can speak, in meetings, presenting in big meetings is definitely a benefit to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would you say are some of the key skills and competencies someone would need to be a project lead or a program lead?
So I think coming from a role that is more so like authoritative, almost like you have to make certain decisions and you have to have certain opinions. Ultimately, you are a humble servant when you're a program lead, so you have to do a lot of listening and understanding of what people have to say. So ultimately, you have to give the best solution regardless of where it's coming from, right? Another set of skills that you have to have is the ability to speak in public or public speaking is very important. And I can tell you, as a shy person, that was extremely daunting, and it continues to be extremely daunting until today. But you get through it and you get better. It's a process, right? Yeah. So my heart will still pound right before a meeting, but you get it together. You have your coping mechanisms, and you go in and you do your thing. You're ultimately the person who is the expert in the room, and you are able to present whatever you need to present.
Yeah, you're doing very well so far. We can't know if you're stressed because you're really well speaking, but I think everyone does. Honestly, I do so much public speaking and different on engagement, and where sometimes getting on stage, you always have that little moment of stress, and once you get started and you kind of through with your story, it kind of like quiet down. But people are always like, oh my God, like it looks so easy, but it's not always, right? It's just there is things that we learn how to manage that anxiety and that stress coming on stage. And I want to talk a little bit. So I want to go back to your career, because I love it that you finish university, you did a co-op, and then you start your career and you've progressed. And we won't have time to go through every step of the jobs that you have, but tell us a little bit, just like from that co-op role, how did you see your career progression at RBC?
Perfect. I can provide you kind of a summary of all of them in kind of one shot. Ultimately, in order to be able to speak in my current role in somewhat of an authoritative manner, you have to be able to back it up with some sort of technical know-how and knowledge, right? Ultimately, when I started as a co-op, I couldn't tell you what a server was.
Yeah.
Right, but then day to day, you're thrown into very uncomfortable situations. I remember being on call 19 hours on a single weekend, for example, because of some problem that I was trying to resolve. And you're always thinking on your toes. So you always have to hone your technical skills in whatever technology that you choose to pursue. But at I think my note on that is you should choose a technology that you want to pursue in tech, because it's very easy to say I work in tech, where like this industry is massive now. You can no longer say, oh, there's just tech jobs out there. It's like, what part of tech do you want to be in? There should be some exploration there. And it's okay in the beginning to be able to jump from one role to the next and try to figure what that is. But a lot of the roles that I've done in the beginning was to really learn the technologies that we had offerings for, to really learn how our customers use those. Because ultimately, this is who you're delivering it for, is your end user, your customer, whoever that is. Otherwise, there's no point to what it is that you're doing. Well, I mean, to a certain extent, right? Like there's certain other types of value that are had. So I would say I had a lot of experience with platforms as a service, a lot of experience in infrastructure as a service, the difficulties behind setting up infrastructure in general that a lot of people don't see, but also gives you very unique challenges to solve. I think the unique part of being in the infrastructure side of things is you touch on everybody's business, right? So you have projects that are involved with AI, you have projects that are involved with you name it, we have it, right? So you have to have a little bit of knowledge on everything. But eventually, I think after I came out, I think it was a little over a year after I came out or so, people started noticing that my ability to speak and my ability to organize would also back it up with the knowledge that I had. And I was given an opportunity to start, leading projects and from even a product ownership perspective.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like you, once you come out and start to see your career, you like flourished in there and grow, and that's amazing. I think that's also part of telling stories like yours, right? And seeing the amazing success that you've had throughout each of the roles. A lot of time, people don't struggle with like their professional development. We talk a lot about it, and it's like, well, how do I create that career path for you? Was it like one step at a time? Did you see like, I want to be a program lead one day, and these are the things that I need to learn to get there? Is there even something more than program lead that you're thinking about in your career progression? And so talk to us a little bit, how did you navigate that?
No, and I think that's a very good and fair question. I think everybody's approach can be different, and I'm just going to talk about my approach. My approach specifically was I don't think anybody ever wakes up one day and says, hey, I'm going to be a program lead, right? It just, sometimes you fall into things because of what you learn along the way and think that, okay, so this is the pivot that I want to make, and this makes sense. Because there's a lot of jobs out there that have obscure names that you really don't know what they are until you get closer and closer to them. Yeah. I think starting out in my career, I just wanted a job in tech, a very basic job in tech, that allowed me exposure to newer type technologies. And from there, you pivot. For me, I set a plan for myself every year and every couple of for a 1 year period and a 2 year period to say, this is ideally where I'd like to end up in my career. And these are the things that I want to learn along the way. But then in that journey of the 1 year, you'll never end up where you wanted to end up. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things you'll learn along the way and you can pivot from there. So for me, I started seeing what it meant to be a product owner, product manager, or even program lead, and it required a certain amount of influence, informal influence that you had. From an agile and DevOps perspective, the development team, as we call it, so whether it's designers, developers, etc., they do not report to the product owner. So you have to be able to convince these people that what you're doing is worthwhile, and you have to have a lot of that informal power. So because I seem to have some level of competence in this area, I thought, why not? Like, let me pursue this product ownership role that I'm seeing in front of me. It's like really cool. I'd like to ultimately pursue it. And so here I am.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's amazing. The reason I ask is because I was wondering your progression, but everyone thinks that if you're successful at a role and that you advance your career, that there is a straight line and that you just walk on it. And the reality is it's the most interconnected, confusing things that we go through before you figure it out. And no one, I didn't know I will be like a full-time homosexual running a career. I knew that. I don't know I was gay, but so and like you go through life and you figure it out. And but I think it's important, like you mentioned, you were starting to identify some of the skills and the competencies and understand the role, and that's important. Did you have did you ever use like mentors or that supported you, and what role they've played, if you had any?
Yes, yeah. I've had tons of mentors. I don't think I could be where I am without having mentors ultimately, because I think this isn't necessarily the case, but I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of my anxiety around networking and mentors for a second. Like, people tell you have to have mentors. People tell you have to like network. What does that really mean? Mm-hmm. It literally just means you meet people, any normal human beings, right? Like any person, and you have a conversation with them. Sometimes it ends up in a, more of a relationship. Sometimes it doesn't. And oftentimes if somebody is more experienced and you trust the way that they do things and you admire the way they do things, the relationship continues naturally into a mentorship, right? So mentorships don't have to last a lifetime, but they have a lot of usefulness in your career. My mentors have not only helped me with kind of pivoting and navigating through my career choices and the next roles that I want to take, but they've also helped me with certain soft skills that you can have, or have noticed me doing something that is maybe a little, a little off, and you have to have that level of trust built with them for them to be able to give you that kind of that feedback back. So I've had several mentors in the years that I've been at RBC, and I think it's one of the most valuable tools. I think you should always have mentors in the direct area that you work in the industry, and you should have a mentor that might be outside of your industry completely to give you kind of that view from the outside in. It's very easy to get caught up in your day-to-day, and you kind of, sometimes you inadvertently have these visors. So you have to be able to have a method to pull yourself out of it. So have I had mentors? Tons. I've had tons of mentors, and I think it's one of the most valuable things you can have in your career and in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and a lot of people always think of that mentor as this official thing that they have, but really what it means is that someone that you talk to and give you advice. And we forget that a friend can be a mentor, a boss can be a mentor, but also, as you said, people outside of your industry, you have to put yourself a little bit out there and ask around. So I want to move. I know always time passed really quickly, but I want to talk a little bit about also the employee resource group at RBC, and that's how we get to know each other a little bit, working together on there. And I mean, you're the chair of the ERG, and kind of like leading some of these efforts. And I think of that shy Walid that was like a long time ago, and now I see you as like the Walid who's like running this. It's amazing. And like, what is your RBC does? What does the chair role do? Tell us a little bit just about that.
Perfect. So what is an ERG? ERG stands for Employee Resource Group. And we have several types of ERGs, and we have several, let's call them chapters of each type. Right. So from our ERG, it's called the Pride ERG, and it celebrates LGBTQ2S plus people. And it's meant to create a space that is free from discrimination against your sexual orientation, gender expression. And that's essentially the vision behind it. It's as simple as that. So there are a lot of things that you do in order to be able to achieve it. Let me just take a step back and tell you how I got involved in the first place. I told you that there was that big Pride parade and met some people, and they introduced me to kind of more folks from the ERG. And then I kind of stumbled through things. In the first couple of years, I joined one of the community outreach subcommittees under there. So that meant essentially interfacing with a lot of folks in outside of RBC, whether it be wonderful organizations like Queer Tech, or EGAL, or so there are several others that we work with as well. Just as a note, there's no preference over one and the next, but we all work with them. That's my little spiel. But ultimately, I reached a point where there are certain things that I personally saw that could change, and I was just very vocal about them in terms of how we track certain performance indicators. And that's just a complicated way of saying, how do we ensure we are successful every single day? And I saw a point where like that just kept coming up again and again. I won't mention it here, but ultimately, that being vocal in that way earned me the chair position in the TNO Pride group, right? So ultimately, I oversee the subcommittees. I oversee some of the relationships that we have in collaboration with other parts of the Pride ERG at RBC, as well as relationships with Queer Tech, etc. And funding requests, things like that. But there are 4 specific areas under me that I oversee. Those are subcommittees. So you have something called collaboration and events. Collaboration and events is essentially this pillar where we're constantly making sure that whatever programming we're pumping out is serving our community, allowing safe spaces for people to interact with one another, meet each other, but also have a great time. And that can include the Pride parades, but we have something called #Pride365, meaning that it's Pride all year long, and there are events throughout the year. Mm-hmm. So that's what that pillar takes care of. From a marketing and communications perspective, making sure that we're able to amplify our voices and our events and reaching our community in an effective way within the organization itself. And then you have learning and safe spaces is another pillar. Learning and safe spaces takes care of things like, partnering with organizations and bringing them in and teaching us about us, our executives, our colleagues, about gender expression, about sexual expression, and a lot of things like that. Building manager packages to fight subconscious bias, for example. So things like that as well. Mm-hmm. And then you have a mentorship aspect where you can be a mentor or mentee, but one thing I do want to note is you can be both. Like, not a lot of people recognize that even if you are relatively junior, you can be a mentor. There's always somebody that can benefit from your experience. But that's what that pillar takes care of. And ultimately, there's always collaborations that we do with external organizations so that our employees at RBC can make sure that they are pumping value into our community personally, right? You're physically present in these places, or even like virtually in today's world. And so we also provide a lot of direction on how, like, funding for these organizations and a sense of belonging for people to say, like, yeah, I'm actually giving back. So that's essentially the
And thank you for walking us through this, right? Like, a lot of people don't understand what resource groups are, what do they do. It sounds like that you have a great structure in managing the efforts. I do see, we work a lot together on different queer tech projects, and I know that there is a lot of other things happening with the ERG. So it's really great to see that. One final question before we wrap up our live stream today. I know there is a lot of queer people watching today who wants to get into tech, and sometimes they're in tech and trying to figure out their career, especially if you're very junior. And product management is something that's recent, right? We talk a lot about it. There is not yet a degree that you go get. I know that there is certain certification that are popping here and there, but most of people don't really get a degree in it, but they end at a company. What advice do you have for people who are looking to get into product management, and how can they make sure that they're successful at it?
That's a really good question. I think even in the industry, there isn't very well understood standards behind what a product manager does, right? You could be managing very small products, large products, and like it's very hard to have a standard behind it. So I think ultimately you need to hone your technical skills before you hone your ownership skills, right? So you can't own something if you don't understand it. And ultimately you can't understand anything 100%. So you have to have the confidence to be able to say, I think I'm ready to start tackling these new things. And another piece of advice is the cliche networking. Make sure that you're going to events like the upcoming careers fair that Queer Tech is having. Shameless plug right there. Go in, have a 10-minute drop-in session with whoever will speak with you, and challenge them and ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge them back, because I love being challenged personally. It helps me think in a different realm, fresh ideas and all that. And then finally, you can do some training sessions just to give you that beginning structure. But ultimately, I know that you have some folks that follow Queer Tech that are more junior and more mid-career. So if you can get your company to maybe subsidize some of those costs, because they can be a little bit expensive, take some of those training sessions out there. There are a lot of great organizations that offer product management type courses just to give you that foundation and help bridge that gap for you if you think you have one. And don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to scream to the tops of the hills and the towers. Just have a voice.
Yeah. Do you have an example of like a certification or a program that you mentioned where people can go that comes to mind?
I do, but I can't.
Okay. We'll ask you later, and we'll add it on there. Well, thank you so much, Walid, for joining us today and sharing your experience. For those who are looking to stay connected with Walid, you can find him on LinkedIn and connect with him and ask him all the questions that I didn't get to ask. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So a couple of things before we close our event that I like to kind of wrap up. It's amazing to always see how, looking at Walid's experience and going from someone who's been shy and really learning how to carry himself and advance in his career. And as you see, all of us can really grow and learn how to speak in public and organize yourself, and also taking certain responsibilities, like being the chair of an ARG, that really puts you at the forefront of being a leader and connecting with people. So I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation. Again, thank you, RBC, for presenting this series of QT Connect live streams and supporting us. And for those who are love what we do and want to continue to support Queer Tech, you can also donate to Queer Tech at queertech.org/support. Thank you to all other partners for QT annual partners, so Sage, Unity Technologies, Ubisoft, VanHack, SpaceSafe, and Local Logic. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for all the initiatives that you're showing to support Queer Tech. So until next time, I hope that you all enjoyed our conversation today. If there is anyone that you would like to nominate for this series, you can go on our website, queertech.org, under queertech.org's QT Connect Café, and there is a nomination form on there that you can put on. Until then, I hope that you are enjoying the fall weather everywhere in Canada, and hope you stay connected and stay safe until then.